taking the idea of the.
Go ahead, Fabrizio. Do you have something?
I'm taking the idea of the coffee, actually.
Okay.
I'm gonna go and
Yeah,
grab a
take
coffee.
coffee. No problem. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We'll get started just in another minute. I see some more people are starting to join, so we give it just another minute and then we'll get started. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on user-centered design in transportation planning. My name is Janelle Hansen. I'm a senior transportation planner here at Systematica, and I'll be moderating today's session. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce our presenters. We're being joined by Andrea Guarini from Systematica, H. June Park from New York City DOT, Fabrizio Prati from NACDO GDCI, and Vivian Dumpa from Placemaking Europe. So the focus of our webinar is user-centered design in transportation planning, is that despite the recent efforts towards sustainable mobility in urban scenarios, the measures currently in place to design and manage public transport services and infrastructure do not sufficiently consider the needs of vulnerable city users. As highlighted by the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development adopted by all United Nations member states, public transport should be designed to be inclusive for women, children, persons with impaired mobility, as well as the elderly. So in this framework, our SysTalk will introduce a series of Systematica research projects based on the application of GIS-based analysis for investigating women's needs as users of the urban railway infrastructure, and for assessing the level walkability for elderly and children. NACDO will present their series of Design Streets for People guidelines with an emphasis on children. The NYC DOT will present on improvements to intersection planning, design, and the operation process. And last, Placemaking Europe will highlight placemaking and the toolkit they use for engagement practices for children. So our agenda for today is as follows. As I wrap up the introduction, I'll introduce Andrea and our speakers, and we'll have time for questions at the end. And we'd love to hear from you. So our Zoom session is set to webinar mode. So if you have a question and would like to ask our speakers, please let me know and I can unmute your mic, or you can send me a chat message with your question. Also, our LinkedIn event page, which I think most of you have joined, it has a chat option. So if you'd like to engage with others and know the other attendees in today's session, we also have somebody that's in that chat. So last, a recorded version of this webinar will be available within a few days. So if you missed anything or wanted to see some links or examples, we will send that out to those participating, as well as be available if someone wasn't able to attend but would like to see us. So for those of you just joining us, welcome, and let's go ahead and jump into the presentation as I introduce Andrea and he can get his slides up. So Andrea, I'll let you do your share. And while he's doing that, so Andrea Guarini is going to be our first speaker. Andrea is an environmental psychologist with experience in human behavior in transport systems, pedestrian crowd dynamics, and walkability. Since 2019, he collaborates with Systematica as a transport research consultant. He oversees research and development activities related to the identification, collection, and exploitation of different mobility data sources through GIS, data analytics, video tracking tools, and questionnaires. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you, Jeanette, and thank you to all our guests. It's really a pleasure to have you on board in this webinar. And I'm going to present you a few slides just to introduce the approach of Systematica in collecting and analyzing data, focusing on the needs of specific target user. And we are going to focus on elderly, women, and children as the users of new project focus on transport planning and also public spaces. So as you probably know, let me scroll my, Systematica is a transport planning and mobility consultancy. We are based in Milan, and our approach is focused on mobility as a service. We do use a multidisciplinary approach, trying to tackle different problems and issues related to a sustainable but also inclusive approach for transport planning. And we also have an internal research unit, which is called Transport, which is producing a series of publications. You can see here an example, some example of this publication, which are fully available from our website. And so I invite you to check this publication, which are truly interesting. The very last one is focused on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on urban mobility. And so for this presentation, this webinar, I want to present you 3 main research projects. Some of them are still ongoing. And the first one was focused on the needs of the elderly for walkability assessment. It was a project performed in collaboration with ARUP and INTA. And so we analyzed a sample of relevant cities based in the EU region. And we analyzed and merged very different open data set, trying to grasp, some useful insights regarding the needs, but also the expectation of the elderly citizen as pedestrian, and again, as citizen of the urban settlement. And the second project I want to introduce to you is called DIAMOND. It's an ongoing project funded by the European Commission and led by EURECAT. And for this project, we are focusing on the needs of women as users of public transport services. And we are focusing on mainly on Systematica on 2 use cases. So the first is the railway transport infrastructure, and the third use case of the project is focused on bike sharing service managed by Wher in Paris region. And the third project is still ongoing, and the first phase of the project has been presented during the Biennale of Public Space, which is a yearly event held in Rome. And we produce a series of maps trying to highlight the needs of children as pedestrians within the framework of the 15 minutes city. Now I want to show you some of the tools and methodology we use for collecting and analyzing data. So this slide is trying to summarize everything, which is difficult. And we do combine both quantitative and qualitative approaches for collecting data. So as you can see from the left side of the slide, we use a lot of GIS, space syntax analysis, but also sensors for counting and tracking pedestrians, mobile application for both trying to build up some behavioral mapping of pedestrian dynamics, but also modeling and simulation approach, audit tool, and big data and data also from social media. And from the right side, you can see that all these tools for collecting data could be somehow grouped based on the scale of the city we want to analyze, from the macro to the micro scale, but also to the level of engagement of the user, which is very much important in this framework. So user-centered design means to engage the user directly in the approach, the co-design approach, but also in collecting data and collecting their opinion about the project. And so some of the metrics we use are standard at the global level. So we do use walk score, for example, or PTAL, the level of accessibility of public transport, or the level of service for pedestrians. But also we are trying to build up some new indexes, some new metrics. And so, for example, this is an ongoing research activity, which is going to be submitted for the next edition of a Transportation Research Board conference. And we are trying to define a walkability index for women in the city of New York. So we are trying to analyze a list of open data. You can see the table on the left side of the slide, to build up a new index which could better take into account the needs and expectation of women as pedestrians. So we are going to focus on the safety issue, but not only, also on the accessibility of services, also on the comfort of the infrastructure and the attractiveness of the public spaces. This is an example of a fruitful collaboration between Systematica and another startup research company, which is called Wher. So they develop a smartphone application, which is a router application for women, designed by women and for women. And so we collaborate with them through a GIS analysis focus on the city of Barcelona to select and identify the most relevant neighborhoods where to launch the app. And so the last example I want to share about our techniques and technology to produce data is the use of Wi-Fi sensor data. So this is another example of collaboration with Systematica. We share a sample of proprietary data collected from a network of about 50 hotspots spread in the city of Milan. And we analyze the data of the sensors to assess the pedestrian dynamics and the mobility patterns in the city of Milan during the entire phase of the COVID lockdown. And now I want to very briefly show you two examples of case studies where we try to apply all the approach and the techniques for collecting data to propose, let's say, a regeneration project. So the first was focused on Corso Buenos Aires, which is the largest commercial venue streets in Europe. So we proposed this project, which was aimed at retrofitting the entire area, trying to give space to pedestrians first, and then also to make the entire environment more vibrant and sustainable and inclusive again. And the second example was presented for a competition by Comune di Milano, Municipality of Milan, which is called Open Square. And I'm pretty sure Fabrizio knows pretty well this initiative, because it was supported very fruitfully by NACTO. And so we try to merge all the technology and initiative and approach and tool for this project, which is, let's say, a regeneration of this mixed area in the city, trying to build up a new area, a public area, which could host, let's say, the activity of the people living there in a very, let's say, inclusive manner. We try to take into account all the knowledge and skill we acquire from the Diamond project, for example, focusing on the needs of women. So I don't want to take more time to our guests, and I thank you all for your attention, and very open for any feedback and questions during the next session.
Thanks, Andrea. So we go to our first speaker, which is going to be Fabrizio, and I'll let him pull up his slides and I will give a brief introduction to Fabrizio. So Fabrizio is an urban designer with 10 years of international experience in safe and sustainable urban design, mobility, street and public space design. He joined NACTO in 2015. As the Associate Director of Design, he helps oversee projects and activities under the Bloomberg's Initiative for Global Road Safety Program and the development of new publications. He is one of the authors of the Global Street Design Guide. He graduated from the Postgraduate Master of Urban Design at UC Berkeley and previously obtained a Master in City and Regional Planning from the Paris School of Planning. Fabrizio is a city enthusiast and an avid urban explorer. Thanks. Welcome, Fabrizio.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction, Janelle. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I hope you can see my presentation and you don't see anything else. And thanks so much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here and share this webinar with these amazing panelists. So today I'd like to share with you one of our programs at NACTO GDCI, which is the Designing Streets for Kids program. But before delving into it, I'd like to briefly introduce my organization for the one that are not very familiar with us. Let's see if my presentation is okay. So NACTO GDCI, or Global Designing Cities Initiative. Let's start with NACTO. NACTO is the National Association of City Transportation Officials, which is a nonprofit organization based in New York City, representing 86 major North American cities and transit agencies, aiming to exchange transportation ideas, insights, and practices. And the Global Designing Cities Initiative as the name suggests, is the sort of international arm of NACTO, which we generally shorten into GDCI. So you're going to hear me a lot saying GDCI. What do we do at GDCI? Briefly, we do policy and design guidance. We do capacity building and community engagement. We support cities developing their interventions and street transformations, and also collecting metrics and evaluating their projects. But probably one of the things that we do that it might be most familiar is the design guidance. And so through the years, NACTO has produced multiple design guides, primarily for the North American context. And recently, in 2016, the Global Designing Cities Initiative, GDCI, released the first international set of guidance. And the Global Street Design Guide, or GSDG, was funded by Bloomberg Philanthropies and was produced with the help of about 100 international experts from 70 cities in more than 40 countries around the world. It's currently available in 6 languages and downloadable for free on our website. It has been endorsed by over 100 cities and organizations around the world. And in 2 words, what the GSDG was trying to do is to encourage and support the transformation of our city streets from car-centric monofunctional spaces into multimodal and multifunctional spaces that put people first, and trying to show also the world of possibilities when we shift from a car-centric approach to a more people-centric one. Something else that we do is, as I was mentioning before, capacity building and community engagement, trying to get inputs from communities into the design of their streets and their cities, but also intervention and street transformations, like this example in Fortaleza, in which we transform this neighborhood into a space for people to enjoy. And of course, using metric collection, data collection, and evaluation to make the case for transforming streets and supporting decision-making. But I wanted to mention today and talk about the Street for Kids program, which is a program with 2 main components. One is the production of a design guide that focuses on one of our most vulnerable users, which is children, and which is completed by a technical assistance part in which we are partnering with local nonprofits and city governments in 12 cities around the world, providing training and implementation support. So the first part was the production of this design guide, which focuses on streets, as everything we do at NACTO GDCI, which is the largest continuous network of public spaces and one of our biggest assets in cities. But as you probably know, fortunately, we did a pretty terrible job at designing them in the past century, creating very unpleasant and unsafe spaces, particularly for our children, and creating a global health crisis of huge proportions that we are also familiar with traffic crashes becoming the leading cause of death for people ages 5 to 29, having every year 127,000 children under the age of 5 dying from outdoor air pollution worldwide, and 81% of adolescents insufficiently physically active. So we partnered with a team of experts from all over the world in order to define and redefine the fundamentals of child-friendly streets. And we can divide these into sort of fundamental components. One, the imperative of providing improved and independent mobility for everyone, and provide spaces to pause and stay, which is particularly important for children and their caregivers. And the idea is that streets should be safe and accessible, healthy and comfortable, but also inspiring and educational. Understanding and incorporating in our designs the children's needs from the streets, and shifting away from just surviving to actually thriving. In terms of like design or street design, the guide defines a set of 5 street design strategies that can help cities achieve children-friendly streets. And we do that through the lens of over 60 case studies from different parts of the world, that help to inform the design of the streets. So for example, we're looking at streets near key destination. It could be a school or a hospital or a park, and how we can transform those to accommodate the needs of children and their caregivers, and then providing examples of how this has been done around the world already through case studies and snapshots. And then we looked at a variety of streets, like, for example, neighborhood streets, and again, look at how this can be transformed with the help of case studies and then intersections. And we also, with the guide, provide detailed guidance for design elements like sidewalks or seating or even cycle infrastructure. But we don't stop there, and we look at how do we make these happen, right? How do we build a plan for implementation, and how do we transform these from theory to practice? And this kind of brings me to the other component of the Street for Kids program, which is the training and the technical assistance part that, as I mentioned before, we did in partnership with local government and city, local nonprofits and city governments in 12 cities, providing training and implementation support. And we built these on the experience of providing technical assistance under various programs in the past and developing projects with local governments all over the world. And this is a project from Milan. Systematica has one of the main offices there. And from this program that Andrea was mentioning before, which is Open Squares, so how we transform this space in front of a school from a space completely car-dominated, unsafe, and unpleasant for children and caregivers into a space where people can actually stay, enjoy, and be safe. Similarly, we did that in many other parts of the world, like this intersection in Bogota, Colombia, with very high speed, very uncomfortable, unpleasant space for children and their caregivers, and how we actually reclaimed the space and redesign and rethought the intersection to create some space for staying and pausing and playing, since there was a lot of real estate to play with, but the sort of kind of car-centric vision that we often have about street was kind of limiting the possibilities there. Or again, in Istanbul, in Turkey, where we took a underutilized space that was primarily used informally as a car park into a space for people of the neighborhood to enjoy and to experience. And finally, Fortaleza, Brazil, which is one of the cities actually we're working under the Street for Kids program, and how we took this underutilized space and created a space for people to enjoy, but particularly for children to enjoy and to play in this space. But how do we make this possible? What are the tools and the methods to engage the users? And so in the guide, we actually identify a series of things, starting from interviews and focus groups and surveys that allow us to actually involve children into the design of our cities and our streets. But a change of perspective is necessary. Even physically, we have to lean down and look at the height of a children to understand that, have child-led tours and mapping, and let children actually lead other children. And they're the most knowledgeable of the spaces that they use every day. They have so many insights that we are always or often overlooking as adults. So the most important thing that in order to design streets for kids is that we need to design them with kids, from the idea to the implementation to the evaluation. But be warned, because that can create risk of uncontrolled gossiping and lingering and potential congestion and barricades, but also dangerous fist fighting, and the most dangerous of all, the impromptu sword fighting. So that's all for me. Design streets that put kids first. That's our kind of bottom line message. And thank you very much for having me here. There's some information here in my last slide in case you want to either download your copy of the Global Street Design Guide or the Designing Streets for Kids. They're free to download on our website, and you can follow us on our social medias if you want to know more. There's my email in case you want to also contact me directly to know more about this initiative and other initiatives we're doing at NACTO GDCI. Thanks.
Thanks, Fabrizio. I give a virtual clap here, so that you can't hear all the other participants clapping as well, I'm sure. So I must say the Bogota, what a transformation. I mean, it was almost like, you know, art afterwards with the looking down, really a great, nice example of a before and after. So we'd certainly like to hear more about that project if you have.
And without physically really doing any, let's say, capital construction. So that was done also with a very low cost. I mean, many of the examples that I was showing have been done through interim transformations or what sometimes we call also tactical urbanism. So a very kind of low cost transformation, but as a starting point for then a more, you know, long-term transformation. So many of these projects are actually underway in their long-term transformations, and you know, I can also give a little bit more info later if
yeah, definitely. I think, you know, seeing, I guess, the implementation process for that long-term transformation, you know, to put infrastructure in place that makes it, you know, kind of a more permanent looking and feeling, right? Maybe we can have some time at the end when we can talk about this, and hopefully we'll get some questions in. So thanks, Fabrizio. So I'm gonna turn it over to June. June, I'll let you get your slides up, and while you're doing this, I'll give your bio here. So our next speaker is Dr. H. June Park. He's a senior project manager with approximately 27 years of experience at the Office of Construction, Mitigation, and Coordination at the New York City Department of Transportation. He is a member of the Transportation Research Board Committee on Artificial Intelligence and Advanced Computing Applications and Traffic Safety Analysis and Policy Group of the World Conference on Transportation Research Society. Dr. Park received his MS and PhD degrees in Transportation Planning and Engineering from the New York University Tandon School of Engineering. He has been a conference speaker and presenter for various international conferences, such as the TRB Annual and National Transportation Planning's Application Conference meeting, the ITE Technical Conference and District meeting, the International Symposium on Enhancing Highway Performance, and Road Safety on 5 Continents. Before joining the NYC DOT, he worked for private consulting companies and was a co-founder and principal software developer at Crossroads Systems LLC, which is a software company specializing in transportation data collection analysis and simulation tool development using advanced emerging technologies. So welcome, Dr. Park.
Thank you. Thank you, Systematica and all participants. My name is June. I'm Senior Project Manager in New York City DOT. I would like to share a case study of the intersection planning, design, and operation for the student and senior citizens in downtown of New York City.
So, sorry to interrupt you. Do you just want to share your screen? Because we currently don't see your slides.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Can you see the screen? Right.
You're good to go. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. So, hello, everyone. My name is June Park. Today, I would like to share some case study for intersection planning, design, and operation for the student and the senior citizen in New York City. Design process, usually start the planning, design, operation. And we're going to comment about that a little bit and share the sample project called the Northern Boulevard Street Improvement Project. And I'm going to share with you some suggestions. Intersection planning and design operation. Wow, this is a big topic. We think about it, every time how to improve the street. Let's see. This is a small video clip. And let's see the intersection dynamics over here. So a lot of cars moving, turning movement. We can see the focus on the left turn. Also, we see the many pedestrians crossing the street right now. So as you see the all the slide, we cannot guarantee because of all the pedestrian and the vehicle's trajectory is different. So they are very varied. So Besides that, this is one quite a few years ago, we have done study for the right movement. How do they show to the trajectory? It showed very, even from the uncongested flow to congested flow. So you can see the all different variation. So it's not uniform problem. This is contains some dynamics. So we're going to explore how to resolve our concern and the issue together. So New York City DOT has done many research. Some of them I would like to share with you. This is a crosswalk study for the 17 intersection and vicinity of the 8th elementary school. This is a location in the New York City. New York City consists of the 5 boroughs: Manhattan, Staten Island, Brooklyn, New York, and Bronx. So as you see the slide, with the parents, this is boys, girls, and with the guardian, boys, and the girls with the guardian. Basically, with the guardian, they calm down, speed is slow, then they run into the crosswalk by themselves. So this is a speed. New York City DOT has some criteria for the 3 feet per second for the school area. So we have some survey that obviously they have much beyond their speed, because they are rushing into the school much faster than they are exiting the school. Now, this is some of the example we shared. This red one indicated PM. So AM is a blue line. It's a blue line. AM looks like a much faster speed. Necto already shared the good information, because they have done very good, design, guidance. So everybody, participated at today's webinar. You can check over their material. It's really wonderful. Besides that, they're wonderful. New York City DOT has also street design manual. So basically, geometric approach. We have some of the key component how to design, how to build, pedestrian environmental in our city. So you can check this website, and you can find the information. Second resource by the highway safety manual by the Esther. It provides some of the, some crash reduction factor. So if you include any kind of, some countermeasure improvement, they can provide how to improve the safety for the children, seniors, all the people. So there is some of the example. You can look over those information. And third one, FHWA provides some of the pedestrian safety guideline and information. Also, you can check over this information. So we know that we have many available, countermeasure and improvement. So if you go to the real project, there is some issue for the, real project, because street cannot build newly. It already started a while ago, maybe 100 years ago, more than, So this is of targeting one of the CBD area. This is a third largest pedestrian activity of the New York City CBD area. So it carried one of the intersection, carried hourly 8,000 people using the crosswalk in this location. And this is contained about the subway line, 7 train, Long Island Railroad, and 20 new bus line all over the, this area. It's a very heavy dense area. Also, this location is called, safe street for the senior focused area. This portion is area focused senior area, because they have some senior center over here. You can see some location, and then you can see some school. So this improved our study focus on this area improvement. Especially Main Street, narrow street, narrow pedestrian speed, heavy congestion, about 8,000 people crossing crosswalk at the one intersection. Another one is a Northern Boulevard. This is a big corridor, including about carried 4,000, vehicle per hourly, quite a long distance, maybe one end to another end, about 120 feet. It's very wide street. So we focus on those 2 streets, how to improve this environment for children, students, also senior citizens. This has done about quite a while ago, but early in 2010, and this location has very congested and a lot of high cross location. So we introduced about the top position, especially like Lepton, so provide the safe environment without any conflicting vehicle. Also, we try to using the temporary treatment, we widening in the pedestrian space like a sidewalk and the corner area. And then eventually this project brought us some capital program in the later about as you see the before, this is a few years back, but around 2016. So it used to be a 60-pin sidewalk, expanded 23, very crowded in the bus stop location. They have more space, but still, even though we visited through the very initial study and following capital program, still outstanding issue constantly happening in the location. This is a kind of key location. It's a very headache. Many carry the many traffic also. It's part of the right next to the intersection is part of the senior focused area. But this one's carry too much traffic. We a little bit, thought it's a very limited room to improve. But a pedestrian is crossing times very limited that sometimes they rush to cross the crosswalk. So there is some of the, a lot of the demanding for the cyclist. So there is a missing uncontrolled crossing location, one of the study location. As you see, the New York City allowed the permitted signal phase. So vehicle and pedestrian go together. So you can see some of the conflicting movement with women as children and turning vehicle. Another issue is that there are two different pedestrian environment. When you look at looking east, it's quite a good bench, like a big wide space for the pedestrian. But when you look at the other side, this is almost like a parking space, very narrow. The location is a very wide, crossing speed distance. So how can combine to improve for the people, all street users, especially pedestrian and cyclists? That is a studying about as you see the long crossing distance, a lot of women and children using this crosswalk, very limited storage space. Also turning vehicle, turning radii, bus stop location, they have some issue causing about some of the crush at this location. That's why we come up some of the street improvement project to improve the signal timing, also providing like a speed leading pedestrian interval. It means pedestrians start to walk early, a few seconds earlier, 3 to 7 seconds, and the later vehicle follow, so driver can see the pedestrian and the cyclist. So as you see that this one, technically this is a very short, distance, only a small portion of a median, and technically they cannot connect to other adjacent intersection. So what we provided, how to widening pedestrian space to provide their connectivity to multiple their destination. The project started initial site visit with all the DOT unit and the community for those politicians, city council member. We discussed together and developed some of the idea how to improve this location, what kind of problem, what kind of concern, how we can improve the safety for the children's, school children, seniors, all street users. So, and then design plan discuss about internally in at DOT side, and practically with 2018 implement the C process. And the further improvement by the bike group will provide a bike share lane, and we are hoping some of the capital funding for implementing some of the more capital permanent improvement. So when you see this is some of the slide I would like to share with you. When you see that this website is at June 2018, you see the kind of long distance people. It's not easy to, senior members, children's cross the street. Basically, we provide some of the refugee island widening, some of the center median, provide the signal over here, and usually in a high visible crosswalk. So technically, this is some of the signal installation provided control by. This portion is we extended. We have a field building. This is a sort of the concrete layout, how to improve the location. This is another location, and they provide connectivity of the adjacent intersection, at least 10 feet wide in a pedestrian pathway. This is June 2018 photo. This is October 2020. So technically, we reduced the one lane because the departure lane only have two moving lane. So we widening over this portion and making parallel parking and reduce the crossing distance, improve the bus operation smoothly. And some of the signal timing modification too. And this location, as you see here, previous slide, I shared with you originally this one. This portion actually extended furthermore to provide a pedestrian space. So this portion is extended, at least they can connect all the way down to the other adjacent intersection that can continue to cross. And then it minimizes the conflicting turning vehicles using the split LPI signal timing, also provide a bike lane situation. So finally, we have some suggestion and recommendation. So we have seen all kind of issue, different kind of, already built in, some city street, how to improve. Starting about that thing, it come out to some one photo when I visited 2017 to University of Milano in Bicocca and the Technical University of Berlin. I had a chance to take a photo. This is inside wide median and using the bus stop over here. So once overlaid that kind of idea to this location. So this is hoping more capital funding or can very nice all the pedestrian friendly environmental, even including cyclists. Also, we have more space for the pedestrian. This is one of the sample project. So our suggestion, we need to think about the more creative idea, revisit the location, what we left over, what unresolved some issue. So we can go back to that kind of situation. We come up with a good vision for the pedestrian to really comfortable, safe, pedestrian friendly streetscaping will be critical for all the street user. Thank you, everyone. So I really appreciate for this opportunity. Also, if you have any question, we can have a chance to talk a little bit later. Thank you.
Thanks, June. It's really great. It's always nice to see before and after pictures in New York City. And of course, it's always just nice to see pictures of New York. So thank you for sharing your examples and seeing about the cool things that you guys are doing with some of the conversions. And
thank you.
Yeah, having recently been there and seeing the pedestrians come back into the city, it's really nice to see. And I'm looking forward to New York returning and being lively again. So cool. So I'm gonna introduce our next speaker, Vivian. While you get your slides up, I'm gonna read your bio here. So Vivian Dumpa is an Athens-based urban planner and geographer with a specialization in creative and inclusive placemaking. She has international experience on placemaking and citizens' inclusion and participation in urban planning, especially on matters of public space and neighborhood revitalization. Throughout her work, she integrates aspects of socio-cultural management, non-formal education, community building, and systemic change. She is an associate partner for STIPO, a Netherlands-based team for urban development, while being located in Greece. And she is a board member of Placemaking Europe. She enjoys working on various scales from neighborhood level to strategic and international one, while experimenting with different topics varying from creative and cultural economy to urban mobility and the circular economy. Go ahead, Vivian, take it away.
Hi everyone, thank you very much, Janelle and Systematica, for inviting Placemaking Europe and myself to join you here this morning, this afternoon, this evening. And I would also like to give a big thank you to Fabrizio, June, and Andrea for really setting very inspiring examples and framework for what I would also like to share with you. through my presentation. I will go a little bit more on the softer side of these things. So I'm not an urban designer, so all of these very, very useful practices and examples and metrics that have been shared, I have been lucky enough to experience them by collaborating with traffic engineers throughout my work. So what I would like to share is how placemaking approaches all these matters of urban mobility, especially when it has to do with inclusive practices. And in presentation, I will focus on children. So let me see. Janelle already introduced myself. So I'm a board member of Placemaking Europe, associate partner for STIPO, and I'm also partner for the CTI level, parts of which are approach I will be sharing very quickly in the next part. So with Placemaking Europe, we are a European network of placemakers, advocating, developing practices, projects, new tools, new knowledge, and linking the bottom up to the top to down, all throughout Europe, while connecting, of course, to the small scale of our cities and our neighborhoods, and to the larger scales of international networks and knowledge. You can find many information and lots of resources about the work that we do and who we are on our platform on placemakingeurope.eu. I will be sharing at the end of my presentation a little bit more about the toolbox that you see up there on the screen. And you can also join our community. We have a very active Facebook group of 4,200 members that we exchange on a daily basis, lots of resources, exchanging experiences. And we have been able to meet quite some time so far before the pandemic. So we are also a very fun network to be around while we develop further our approach and tools around placemaking. So we'll very quickly pass by the slides because I think we all lie on the same page here about what placemaking is. So it's about how you transfer from space to place. So how do you move from the physical characteristics of a space, the design, the hardware, let's say, of a physical space into the place. So how we feel, how we experience, what kind of emotions, experiences does a space carry. And I will be using some slides from Project for Public Spaces, which was one of the first ones, if not the first one, who originally pinpointed the term placemaking. And it is often said that it's very hard to create a space that will not attract people, but it's remarkable how often this has been accomplished. And I'm sharing here a photo from my hometown, Thessaloniki in Greece, where, according to me and my colleague who took this picture from the Netherlands, is the essence of placemaking. It's all about lying there outside in the public space, feeling safe and comfortable to show affection, show your emotions, and take off your shoes. So if you see those elements out in the public space, it means that something has been working really right. And now moving a little bit to more the mobility aspect of it. Fred Kent, one of the fathers of placemaking, is saying that if you plan cities around cars and traffic, you get cars and traffic, but if you plan around people and communities and places, then this is what you will attract. And of course, you can attract it by designing this way, but it's also important to address the elements of democracy, participation, and inclusion. In placemaking, we say that community is the expert, not just to make a title around it to make it different, but because it's the end user that you're addressing. And the end user, the user-based design of public space and mobility, is the one who knows better what they need. And placemaking is the approach that provides spaces where people exchange ideas and take action together, which is essential, especially during our times, to tackle climate emergency, economic inequity, and during around this period, the effects and the impact that the pandemic has had on our way that we experience and live in our cities. A little bit of placemaking framing, just to show a little bit how we approach it. In placemaking, we said that we have a lot about design-led and the hardware. So around mobility, it's very relevant to what the examples have been shared from by the speakers before of me. The org-ware are the aspect about how we manage the public space or the streets. So what are the mechanisms around it? Are there any coalitions that have to do with the street management? And the software is how people experience the space, how people socialize in public space, what kind of uses and activities we have there. And in the org-ware aspect, I'm coming back to that, is also where the participatory process and inclusion processes are coming in the placemaking process. Again, I cannot highlight further that the community is the expert, and us as experts that have studied this field come there to facilitate the process and provide our insights in order to move some steps ahead what might have already started from the community. So here's what I would like to share about the City Tile Level. The City Tile Level is an international platform, it's an international program that has taken the placemaking approach that maybe sees a little bit, not from the top to down exactly, but sees the public space as a public space, when in the City Tile Level we would like to include elements that have to do also with the design of the building. And many elements of mobility planning come also into the City Tile Level. In the end, I will share a link where you can also check the books, the open source books that we have around the City Tile Level and how we approach this methodology. Just to give you an example about what the City Tile Level could look like, here we have an example of a storefront. So what you see here, of course, are elements of public space design. We have a wide pavement where people can also pass by, they can stop to interact with people. You also have enough space to have trees, so shade. You also have space to have benches where you can sit. But here you also see how the shop itself interacts with the public space. So what are the offers that activities on the ground floor of the building can offer in order to enhance the activity of the public space itself? In placemaking, these are some of the main elements that we're looking at: is the usability, the uses and activities, comfort and image of a space, and of course, access and linkages. And this is where the mobility part comes in. And just very briefly, this is the process more or less in the simplistic kind of way of a placemaking. So of course, in the beginning, you define your community and the stakeholders, you evaluate together with your stakeholders and community the space, you develop your place vision, short-term experiments, small-scale actions, or tactical urbanism, as it has already been shared before, until you can move to the longer term while re-evaluating all the time and again the outcomes and the outputs that you have had. And of course, the tactical urbanism and lighter cookie cheaper approach is very much essential in what we're doing with placemaking. I will go through this very fast because it has already been shared by the speaker before me. So what we say about placemaking, because we don't have a definition in placemaking, we have many nice quotes that help us to give the essence of placemaking, that our approach is about organizing your happy accidents by opening up to unexpected initiatives, emerging from an engaged community. So it's a very much open-ended process, and this is where we find our flexibility and let's say creativity. So let's move now where the inclusion part comes in. And how to engage children. So we'll be sharing some insights, some tips from my own experience by working with different age groups. So the Tokyo project was something that we developed with students in high schools of Greece, aged between 16 and 18. And the City Tile Level for Kids was a project funded by the Bera Valer Foundation and the Urban 95 program in order to develop methodologies that will engage very young children, aged 0 to 3, and their caregivers into how they can participate in placemaking processes in different contexts. So these are the key 8 key steps to engage children into the processes that have already been shared before. So first, make the engagement child-led. Let the child lead you. Community is the expert, the target group is the expert, and trust me, no matter their age, they know what they need and what they want. So this will be part of the process that we have let the child lead us to where he wanted to go, to show us what are the elements around the public space that trigger his interest in order then to turn it into data for our own design. Make engagement playful. As Janelle introduced, I'm also familiar with cultural management, non-formal education. So what I would like to invite you is to engage and integrate into your processes as many tools as possible. Feel free to be very much creative, finger painting. All of these tools can give you so much input and insights, on the one hand, like data, while on the other hand, you develop a relationship of trust with your target group. In this case, it's a child, but it can also be an elderly person, it can be anyone. And make engagement reciprocal. We are not there as experts, so we are there also to listen. And active listening is something that will offer so much back to you when you develop your processes. So be there to listen, be open to adjust your processes, and of course, open up the dialogue. And stimulate kids' creativity. Sometimes when you engage with children, things might get a little bit messy. They might not look as much, aesthetically as you might have wished. Sometimes as urban planners, architects, designers, we tend to be a little bit very much protective about the output and outcome of our designs. But let it be. We are there to experiment with our end user. And of course, we can make adjustments together because we both learn together. So stimulate kids' creativity, you can see what might come up. And build trust. Through my experience, I have been practicing participatory process for almost 10 years now with different age groups. When people see that you are there, not with a dynamics of power, the power that a designer might bring, but you are there really to listen and engage and be part of their community as well, be it short term or longer term, you can really get lots out of data, but also outcomes. And here you see from my experience that we have had with the Sit at Eye Level for Kids program, that it was interesting to see how you not only need to get the trust of the child, but also of the parent, because the parent was there like an intermediate facilitator of the process. The child with the parent were a system that we had to engage with and develop trust. And this is an example from the TOPI project that I wanted to share with you. This is the outside of a school that we did together with the students. You see here that this part of the body of the dragon was how the whole wall used to look like. It had lots of tags and graffiti, maybe aged even like 20 years ago. The wall has not been painted like 20 years ago. So it was a matter of gaining the trust of the children, of the students, that by improving the wall, therefore how the school community looked out in the neighborhood, they would also not lose part of their identity, because this wall had stories and tags and little poems and dedications that looked like dirt, but in the end they were their own content, and they didn't want to lose it. So together with them, by being active there to listen and engage, we developed something that they both hugged. This graffiti was developed 6 years ago, and elements of it are still there on the wall. And of course, the sixth step is about learn by doing. There is no right or wrong way to go when you engage with children or any other target group. We both learn together through the process. Use tactical urbanism with kids. You have no idea, or maybe you have, how much they enjoy to take brushes out, to paint the pavement, and develop the city the way they want. They love and they build trust and empowerment just by taking a brush and have the power to really change their urban environment. And by this activity that they take the brush to paint the pavement as they want, you actually develop the active citizens that will change the cities that we have in the future. So this brush has lots more power than we think, only for the short term of changing the pavement or the mobility elements of space. So these were some tips. I'm also aware of the time. And just to guide you a little bit of what we offer as Placemaking Europe. So for the last 3 years, we have developing a toolbox, an open source toolbox with a collection of guides and manuals you can find online on our platform. So when you go to placemakingeurope.eu, you can check this tab here, and you can navigate around our platform and find tools that placemakers around Europe and internationally have offered to our initiative. Based on the process step that you are in your placemaking process, or on the theme that you might have. So here we have a theme about how to be inclusive, so tools that can help you with how to be more inclusive in your participatory processes, but also how to work with children. And here you see some of the tools that you can use. And of course, I'm pretty sure that you also have tools in your own methodology that you might want to share with us. So feel free to reach out to us. We have a form on our website that you can submit your tool and manual, or just drop us a line with the email. And also on our platform, you can find open source and download 2 books. The first one is Our City, talking about inclusion and exclusion in public space and how we shape our cities. And you can also find our book, The City at Eye Level for Kids, to download, again, open source. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm really looking forward to your patience and discussion afterwards. Big thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. I give you also a virtual applause. So you're really good on time. So excellent. So I'm going to open it up to some questions and discussions, and you can send us a chat, or you can use the Q&A. We have some questions that have started coming in, so I let the speakers also unmute themselves. We have one question directed to you, Fabrizio. Maybe you want to go ahead and start answering that, and some to June. And feel free to send them.
I can kickstart us. I'm going to read the question for the ones that didn't see. It's from Pedro that asks, paint-based interventions enable quicker action, experimentation, and adjustment, and that's great. My questions are about their temporary appearance. One, I assume that in the short term, it reduces resistance from those who are against change, but in the long term, does it make more vulnerable? And the paint-based interventions you showed, are they being converted into more permanent interventions? So, I mean, it's a fantastic question. I mean, this is really a great question, and I could probably answer it for a very long time. So I'll try to be kind of short in my answer. I think, Pedro, again, thanks for the question. I think you're pinpointing some important points about this type of interventions, and Vivian was showing that in her presentation. What I can say is that using interventions can be and should be an enabler, right? It can demonstrate bold ideas, can implement design with easily accessible, low-cost materials, can be fast. It's not always fast, but can be fast, so faster. You can test design prior capital construction. You can empower communities, right? You can involve them into that process and use that as a tool for empowering communities. It can be used, and I witness it firsthand, it can be used to update policies and practices based on new evidence gathered through those temporary interventions. It can, it can help in many ways, kind of transforming the way things are done, right, within cities and transportation departments, planning departments. But I want to say, like, if you have the money and everybody's on board, politicians, residents, communities, well, there's no need to go through this phase necessarily, right? But it can be used as a way to reduce the risk of failure, right? Or the opposition, sometimes internally, of engineers or politicians. It's definitely a short-term action, but it's also kind of an engagement tool, right? And it can be used that way. It's not the only way of engaging communities, but it can be used as an engagement tool. But you always have to create a long-term plan and start from a long-term plan. You can't just start and, it's not an end in itself. So we need to think from the beginning of the next steps of those projects. And sometimes those are test grounds for programs, for then scaling them up. Like in the case of Milan, Andrea was mentioning, Open Square started as like a few interventions that were done by the city. And now it's actually a crowdsourced or like, citizen-led program where people actually submitted proposals, and then the city has been, is working as an enabler to transform those spaces. But those spaces are suggested by citizens, by group of citizens associations and so forth. So it can, can become a program, and it, can help with like long-term change. We have to incorporate things like maintenance. It's true that like paint wears out, especially if we paint where there are like vehicles. Yeah, that doesn't last that long. It depends on the paint that you use and the materials that are available. And we, sometimes, the cheapest materials can also be, can have more cost long-term for maintenance. And if we don't use, I don't know, paint, like traffic paint, that can wear off quite quickly. And we have to kind of incorporate that from the beginning and have some extra costs. The same with like furniture, materials like bollards. Bollards will break. Furniture might wear off too or break. So we have to incorporate that from the beginning. But I mean, what I want to stress on is that this is kind of like one phase, right? The ultimate goal is like to transform permanently, the spaces. And it's not always the case. It doesn't always work. And it's not always the solution. But sometimes it's a great step. Okay, that's why I sort of like, or we like to call it interim transformation because it's sort of like, it's not necessarily temporary, it can be long-term, but it's also something in between other type of transformation, more more costly, but they can actually transform permanently. And I think this is a good way of like testing them before we do something permanently and then we realize that it doesn't work.
Yeah, grazie Fabrizio. I would also add that that changing a city is a very dynamic process, and I know from experience that creating precedent is something that is really, really important to to reduce the resistance of colleagues working within city administrations that are more skeptical about taking away space from the cars and giving it to people, or about implementing traffic calming measures, etc., etc., etc. The value of precedent is very important. So I think the projects, as you mentioned, also help for that. Thanks a lot.
And actually, to answer the question, like some of the picture that I showed, they are currently either under planning or under construction, so they are being transformed into capital. But it sometimes takes a few months to implement a project like that, and then when the capital, like the sort of plan for the capital, might take like 3 years or something like that. So showing like hopefully I'll be able to show it next time that I'm inviting a webinar, some capital construction from the project we did.
Thanks, Fabrizio. So there's actually another question here. This one is directed to you, June. I just will read it here. It says, it's really tough to introduce deeper changes in the kinds of places you showed. I know because I've had experience. My question is about providing enough time to pedestrians to cross. So a crossing speed of 1.2 milliseconds is way too much to expect from elderly citizens. And even 8 seconds, in my opinion, is too high. In crossings with 3+ lanes, adding cleaning time, red for all, makes the car stopping time even longer, increasing the risk of congestion. But the dilemma here is between car congestion and pedestrian life. How do you deal with that situation?
Thank you for asking a question. Hi, Pedro. Can you see the screen over here?
Yep.
Yeah, because once you consider all the intersections, so I'm going to answer first question about the, this is we have a research about the, speed. Actually, we got from the feet per second. Usually my friends study walkway, we study in the crosswalk. This is a range about the very heavy crosswalk in a time scale area in those location. So when you see that over here, we using the school 3 seconds for 3 feet per second for the elderly people for the school area. So technically about that range it covered. So we have a New York City DOT has a policy for the 3 feet per second. So about 0.9 meter, a little bit higher. That is we usually prioritize for the pedestrian. But in this case, we extended a little bit, room for the, because so much traffic, as you pointed out, several thousand vehicles per hour. So we using the 3.5 and then utilize it. That's why we extended this one. When you look at the here for the screen, we build this looks like a pathway. So people previously waiting for the intersection over here, they hardly find the space. So after that, we minimize. This is a big intersection. Actually, this is one, but we can partially divide by half or a quarter. That's why we can utilize it. We should carry this is a bridge location. So much congestion is not, create a lot of other issue. That's why we are developing some of the alternative route using the center median space. So this is help you for understanding. New York City DOT has 3 feet second for the elderly member, senior area, and school area. That is we standard form. And also other locations 3.5 second, 3.5 feet per second. Also, if you have such a long crosswalk, main idea, if you have a directly provide older enough to crossing time, if not, so we can utilize it center space as a pedestrian walkway like this. That can connect to come to the other next destination kind of thing. You see the right side, much more pedestrian space. Eventually, agree upon with the community and the funding issue, we can make a similar structure for the pedestrian. That is the main idea. Thank you for your great question. Hopefully, this is some answer to you.
Yes, yes, it does. The question is also, I mean, what do we do with pedestrians who cannot walk at that speed and who will be caught by the red light in the middle of the crosswalk? What do we do to make it safe for them? It's really a tough question. Yeah, that is just as I mentioned to you. This is how we think about really great question. We think about that kind of issue. That's why New York City DOT provide accessible pedestrian signal. They can hear the voice. They can hear the sound. Also, we have making the pathway at least a certain feet to create it. Some space they come to here. So that's why we this refugee island, even though very minimized, we just they can stay here or center median. So it's not recommended long distance one shot. It's almost typical, even adult or young man. So that's why if you can create some of the partial intersection, you have a big intersection, you can divide by several small intersection. That thing I think is one of the option. But we can think about together using, after meeting about that, we can have a conversation together in a certain context. Thank you. Thank you for your question. Thank you.
Okay, so we have another question here. This one is for you, Andrea. Safety of women in public space and public transport is something that we are working on at Polis. It's a very important but often ignored and underestimated issue. Could you please talk a bit more about the app you mentioned on safety of women in public space?
Yeah, sure. So the app is called Wher app and is active in Italy right now in a few cities, large cities in Italy. So the objective of the app was to provide a service, a smart routing service, let's say through mobile phone. And the way they provide the service is they engage let's say a small group of very active users they call warrior. So they are women which actively rank the level of safety of the streets perceived by them considering three criteria. So the lighting of the streets, let's say the crowding of the streets, and an overall assessment of the perceived safety level. And then they provide this, let's say, traffic lights assessment, which is embedded into the road segment, available for the larger part of the users, so for the community of the users itself. And I see this kind of service very useful also. Touching the point from the Vivian presentation, I see, community as the expert. I see trust, I see empowerment through this project. And they also run workshops and seminars. The community is still live, and they participate also in face-to-face events. And for us, for Systematica, it was a pleasure to collaborate with them also to envision that, the safety issue, security, let's say, issue for women walking, especially at nighttime, is still there, unfortunately. And for example, in the ongoing research work we are working on for New York City CBD, we are using the open data of the police department of the city. And in Europe, we are not very much used of the possibility to collect and analyze this kind of open data related to crime and security. So there are some controversial aspects, let's say, regarding the possibility to map the crime. And also the guys from the Wher app receive, some of the people are skeptical about this kind of initiative, because if you do map the level of crime in a city, you could create, let's say a loop, a negative loop, So if people do not feel safe visiting a part of the city, they won't go there again and again. So the point is to balance, let's say, the possibility to see where are the areas which are not very safe and secure for pedestrians in general, let's say, but also to run up some initiative to change the situation. Also engaging the user to do so. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. I think you also have a follow-up question. I'm sorry, I can't see all of your name, but I unmuted you, so you should be able to ask the question. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm Bona from TU Dortmund, Germany. My question is for Andrea. Like, did you also consider the travel time use when you're looking at the comfort aspect? Because travel time use here, I mean the activities, what they do while traveling. Do you also, because comfort is completely related to that, like if your vehicle or if your transport or if your ride is so comfortable, then they will just involve themselves in engaging in other activities while traveling. So just a curious question, if you're also looking on that aspect, like it's so called multitasking. So do you also consider that? Yeah, thanks for your presentation. Yeah.
Yep, I think your question is related to the needs of women, if I got it right.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, and yeah, I can say I mean let's say the largest project ongoing one. I mean we were executing about this topic is the DIAMOND project. It's an H2020. For this project, we merged very different kind of data collection tool, and from the questionnaire. We were able to interview a large sample of women participating in the research. And from, let's say, from part of this questionnaire, we were able to profile their mobility patterns and their needs, let's say, daily routine, the way they need to use public transport, the level of comfort and safety they experience while using public transport or by walking to reach their destination from the, let's say, from the railway infrastructure. So it's difficult, let's say, during the presentation, I showed you a slide which try to combine the very different tools from the more quantitative to the more qualitative. And I mean, if you want to engage the user, you need to use this kind of survey, checklist, self-audit tool. Let's say the most qualitative the tool is, the more probable is to collect also useful insight directly from the users. If you do use GIS or other, say, quantitative tool, it's difficult to integrate this kind of information. So the best solution is to integrate and merge this kind of tool to achieve a more informative decision.
Yeah, thanks. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thanks. So Vivian, we have one question here. I'm going to send this your way. Do you feel participation has positive long-term effects in children in the way they relate to spaces, but also in the way they feel more confident and participative as citizens in community life?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for the question. It's one of my favorite ones because it's actually the essence why I do what I do, to be honest. So I have seen the long-term effect. The students I have been working with 6 years ago, that they were back then 16 years old students, they are now, and because I'm still in touch with them, they still reflect back on their experience that we have had for 2 semesters at school, working on placemaking and participatory processes. And now they are really active citizens participating in other initiatives of our city that have to do with the urban environment, with greening the city, with public spaces. They're also much more politically aware about how a city is managed. Because something that we had as part of the process was that we also engaged them in what it means to take a license to put the paint on the pavement. So they started understanding what is the process, the mechanisms behind of that. So they really empowered them towards becoming this, what we call active citizens. Some people do not like this term, but I think you get the point. How do you take action about improving your life in your neighborhood and your city? And something else that I have noticed is that at least in Greece, the profession of urban planner, around us are not very, familiar. Students will strictly go out to civil engineer or to an architect. So part of that was very interesting to see what other options they might have, because they really like the aspects of talking with the community and being more creative. Not that the civil engineer is not, of course, but finding also other elements of how they can be part of the professional life and also part of the community. I don't know if I responded to the question. Yes. But thank you.
Yeah, I think the question was just on long-term effects. And if you gave a great example, I mean, you're already seeing kind of feedback from students and children that you've talked to and years have gone by. I mean, that's a great example that you feel like they're more engaged and they can reflect back, and it really imprints that memory in them and they take that with them. So I think that's a great example and nice success story.
One small thing, it's also interesting to see how the information and empowerment that you might offer to one child might travel to the family environment onto the friends environment. So many children that we were working with brought along the process also their family, like mothers, siblings, and their best friends. So it's a very interesting and impactful way to see how you can grow from a group of 10 students and children to a wider community and impact.
Cool. Pedro, I don't know if you want to follow up with anything else on that question.
No, those were great answers. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks. So I think that wraps up all of the questions. If I missed one, no, I don't think so. But if there's anything else, any other questions, feel free to send them. If not, then we thank our speakers and presenters and those that ask questions, and we will share this recording so you can go back and go through all the material again. So I want to give another round of applause to our speakers, and thank you so much for presenting and taking the time today. Everybody's on mute.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
It was
you.
really a
Thank you
pleasure.
so
Great
much.
presentations and great questions.
Very good presentation. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks. Take
Thank
care,
you.
everyone. Have a nice night, day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.